Hi, this is Laura Hicks, and welcome to ScaleUp for Success Summit. The virtual summit is sponsored by ScaleUp Biz, whose world-class experts are dedicated to helping business leaders grow their companies and honoring people in the workplace. That's why we're bringing together the business authors, coaches to talk about their work in this series so that you can learn about all their tips and tricks of the trade. Now, it's my honor to introduce to you Linda Conyard. Thanks for being with us today, Linda.
It's such a pleasure, Laura. I really appreciate the invite.
Well, to kick it off, what I'd really like to ask you, and it may sound unusual, but what could you share with us that would be something most people don't know about you?
So personally, something people don't know about me
It could
or
be
business-wise?
either. Your choice.
I'm going to share both. There you go. So something personal that people may not know is that I absolutely love rescuing animals, and I don't have enough land for all the animals I'd love to rescue.
Ah,
So
yes.
that's something that I love. Yeah, I've got a real affinity with animals. They were my refuge actually in my childhood trauma. So now I give them a place to exist without fear of trauma or being hurt or whatever. So for me, that fills my heart personally, and of course my grandchildren. And in business, the thing that people may not really know is that I'm doing an independent research project that is actually looking at what would it take to have unity between white Australians and Indigenous people in this country. Then it has implications for global impact around the world. And for small business owners, what they may not know, or to medium-sized business owners, is that they're actually leaders in their field. So when you start a business, you actually step into that leadership role, and you may not even register that that's what you are.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good point. So talking about the animals that you rescue, one of the things that we work with business leaders on is being on purpose. So many times people we find have issues around making money, and it helps them to actually understand that making money to go out and go help someone or something on this planet, make it better, improve it, is a really good reason to go out and be successful. So
yeah, and to profit for purpose. I think that's really important, not to have money. I mean, we all have our money stories, and I'm sure it gets in the way of all of us, and it's a process of working through that. But like you say, when you're profiting and you're on purpose, that's a whole different story. For me, it is anyway.
it is. And your research, I am sure, will have wide-ranging impacts because as human beings, getting along with other groups of human beings in general is not our best forte, as history has shown around the globe. So it's not unique to Australia. It's a struggle that we seem to continue no matter how long we've been on this planet. So anything that would help that would also, again, benefit the people on this planet as well. So thank you for sharing that with us. I appreciate that. Um, what is a book that you have found was helpful to you that you have read more than once that you would recommend to other people?
So the one book that was instrumental in my own trauma recovery, I'm a trauma therapist, which is why I'm just absolutely enthralled with trauma and how it impacts us and how we can heal it. So one book that was really instrumental in my own trauma recovery in that journey was Peter Levine's Waking the Tiger. And one of the quotes that he says was, trauma is a fact of life. However, it doesn't have to be a life sentence. And for me, when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, there's hope. Like there's actually hope out of this place. So, and I was in my 50s at the time. So, I was grateful for that.
Yes. That is quite a great quote.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you, so when we're talking about mental health, and I know yours is trauma that you specialize in, but how do you take care of your mental health?
Yoga, meditation, being with my animals, withdrawing. I'm quite a introverted person. I love to be with people, but I also love to withdraw. So making sure that I have that place to withdraw. I can go to my garden, looking after my food, what I eat, try and grow as much as I can for myself. Yeah, there's many ways, connecting with my grandchildren, my family, those kind of really simple, basic things that fill up, my heart. So and I get the signs. As soon as I get the signs that I'm out of whack a little bit, I go, oh, I'm missing something, and I check myself. So just, it doesn't matter that I go out of whack. And sometimes we have to go out of whack as business owners, and we've got to knuckle down and,
Right.
work extra than what we would normally to get something done. But if that becomes a pattern and that's what we always do, then that's where we head into problems. So to be able to check yourself and know your own signs of when you're not quite on track, then you just reorientate, just recalibrate yourself and then come back.
Yes, and those are very good points, because as entrepreneurs, whether you're new in business or you're scaling and moving and growing your business, we can have a tendency to, as you said, get out of whack and not be in balance with ourselves and the world around us, and then we're not as effective if we
Yeah.
don't. So that's one of the reasons why I ask that question, is because most, I don't know, I don't know, as individuals, sometimes we don't think, well, is it just me, right? And not that,
Yeah.
well, this happens to a lot of people, and we need to take care of ourselves. So thank you for that.
And I think,
um,
Laura, with that also, one of the programs I run is called Journey Back Home. And I think it just starts with ourselves, like really connecting to ourselves. And I think the three great disconnects in the world are disconnect from self, disconnect from others, and disconnect from our environment. So the starting point is, unless we're really deeply connected to our inner world, then whatever we're doing in our outer world, we're operating on a pattern that's been formed from the experiences that we've had throughout our life. So it's not necessarily our true self. It's a way that we are surviving the world. So we're continuing this survival pattern rather than living our full potential and our truest self.
yes, and I recognize that in myself. Working in a male dominated industry for many years, I had what I considered a suit of armor that I would go suit up and go out and do battle. And
Yeah.
it literally was how I looked at it. And I, yeah, looking back now, I recognize how unhealthy that actually was, and how much of me exactly stayed inside that suit of armor, didn't get out.
Yeah.
So it was also like my own internal prison as well, in some
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you deal with self-doubt or doubt from others? I
I
figured
remember
you'd
I
be
was
a good
doing,
person to ask.
I was actually doing this course, and I cannot remember what it was, but it was really good. I think it was a writing course. And what really struck me is when the person who was teaching it, I wish I could remember so I could share, but I can't, was saying that, for every 9 doubts, you get a 1, oh, I've got this. And often people give up in that period of the 9 doubts. So it's like staying with it, staying with it, staying with it. I've got it. So really sitting in satisfaction for that feeling of, I know I've got this. I know I have. So writing out the doubts, they're going to come. It doesn't matter. They'll come. And I'm sure that even the elite business owners have doubts. It's about what you do with them. So if you can ride them out, go, yes, I hear you. And that's the end of the conversation. It's like when we hook in and we engage in that story of the doubt, and we believe the words that are there that have probably come from someone else. They're probably not even our own words, but we've taken it on and swallowed it whole, whatever someone else has said to us. So, and I think the other thing around doubts is, don't compare. Don't compare yourself. There is no one else in the world like you. You cannot compare apples to apples because you're the only apple. So
Right.
it's like really just staying with, even if it's been done a million times, it hasn't been done by you. And I'm sure
Right.
people have heard this before, because you are an individual. You've got many individual qualities that are not replicated in another human being.
Right.
So every one of us has a gift of some kind.
So it's one thing to take what people achieve as possibility. So what is able to be done? It's another, as you said, to use it as a yardstick to measure, and then to quite possibly beat ourselves up over it. Right.
Yeah,
That's
because
entirely a different thing
sorry.
altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, because someone who's achieved that has much more staff than a lot of us. I'm still a single person business owner and doing many, many things in my business, looking to scale up right now. So it's like, really putting yourself, like they started where you are. They were not an overnight success. They've been years and years in their business before they've got to there. So having all of these understandings that, yes, they got there, and then look at what did it take for them to get there, because they'll have a story.
Right. And that's many times what we don't take into account, right?
Yes, exactly.
Where the beginning really was for them. Well,
Yes.
that's a great point. When did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I think I was one before I knew I was one. So I don't think I actually knew that I was going to do that. But I was working in Education Queensland and just got disillusioned with the system and the structure of the whole system. And I left there and started studying in 2004. And I've been studying ever since. So I started my business in 2006. And it's just been such a roller coaster for me as far as my own personal development and learning, like dealing with the money stories that I had. Because as a child, money equaled love to me, because that's the only time I felt that my father was nice to me. So that was the equation that I made in my mind. So I
Right.
transpose that into business and it doesn't work. Like that feeling of taking money doesn't work. So getting to the bottom of that, and that's what I'm talking about, this inner work, this journey back home. As we come back home, we can release all of these formative adaptations that we've created, and then we can start to really live as our true selves.
Right. So a lot of people don't recognize that they're running around with an operating system that was developed somewhere in between, what, 3 and 9 years old, somewhere around there.
Even in utero, depending, with the mother's traumatized, then the developing baby, actually their nervous system is actually at normal rate is higher than what it would be if the mother was not in that traumatized state. So very individualized. But I think, the point that you make around people not knowing, and for me, that was also true. I didn't know that my life was in domestic family violence, hidden domestic family violence. And it was just my normal. So what we are raised in becomes our normal. So it's just that we forget to look and challenge that normal. Is it really that normal for me?
Right. And so I look at it a little bit like computer software. It's an easy thing to look at it that way, because you look at all these older versions, right? There was a version of DOS that we all worked on if we worked on computers in the early days. And so I'll date myself.
Me
And and what we would consider is slow, old, not useful now. And it's not that it doesn't have any use, but it's not efficient. It's not easy to use. It's not the best model of current software, right? And that's
That's
how I
right.
look at our operating system. It's you gotta look at it and you gotta upgrade it.
Yeah, that's right. And the other thing that you bring in there when I hear you speak is that there's a lineage to this operating system. So not dismissing or throwing out what's happened, because without that DOS, we wouldn't have what we have here. So it's really honoring all of those steps, even if people have been in multiple businesses, had difficult, situations around those businesses, failed businesses. People like to exclude that and just not do that again. But if we bring it in and that's part of your business entrepreneurial journey, it's like, what are the learnings from that? And it's only a failure if we don't learn. So bringing that in and having that business lineage and acknowledging our own lineage, then we actually are in a better place to really be fully experiencing this human entrepreneurial journey.
Yes. And so you brought up a word that I did want to discuss, failure, because we have been taught that that is a horrible word, right? I mean, we have all kinds of programming around that particular word. So what I'll ask you is what was one of your biggest failures that you've had, or one that you would share? And I was going to say, what did you get to learn from it? Because that's the important takeaway, is not everything goes perfect.
No. And I think, for me, it's the biggest one was that money one. It was huge. Honestly, I would feel sick in my stomach when someone went to pay me in the early stages. I never felt like I was enough. I never felt like I gave enough information. And I kept studying and studying, kept adding and adding. It's like, Linda, when is it enough? Like, you
Right.
have enough knowledge. So it's not about my skill set and my knowledge. It's about how I am with myself. So that's why it's so important, I think, to really connect to yourself, unravel these ways of being that don't serve you anymore, recognize them, honor them, go, okay, that's there. Excuse me. Okay, that's there, but I don't actually have to continue that pattern anymore. But once we see it, we can't not see it. You'll see it showing up everywhere in your world, the pattern or that theme. So it's like, if people take that step, then they're actually going to not recognize their life in 10 years, 5, 10 years even.
Right. Yeah. Because of, yes, the dramatic changes that it actually means to them afterwards.
Yeah. So failure for me, it's a bit like let trauma be a teacher, let failure be a teacher, let doubt be a teacher. Let all of these things that we've made wrong, include them, because until we include them when we have that whole picture, because if you look at the continuum, there's a continuum of like real positivity and there's a continuum of real doubt. And somewhere along there, we're just moving all the time. So in allowing and accepting and being aware, that's where we don't fall into and get stopped by the doubt, the failure, the overwhelm, whatever it is. We can go, oh, there you are. Now, how do I recalibrate from there?
Right. Yeah. So, how have you worked with doing publicity for your business?
Oh, haven't been so good at this one. I don't like social media much.
It's not unusual to hear.
Yeah. But I have to say, there's a real readiness in me now where my business has moved direction to that I feel that I'm ready to step out. But it's taken time. Like I've done speaking training. I've been on the stage and just thought, oh my gosh, that was horrible. Like, and people would say that was great. And you go,
It probably
did you hear
wasn't.
yeah, did you hear what I heard? Like it just didn't align with me what was coming back. So just working through all of I think just knowing that when you step into entrepreneurship, it's a journey, and it's a journey of self growth. It's not about a business and a job. You go and get a job for that. Entrepreneurship is very different, I believe, if you take up those opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. So the thing that I really wanted to talk to you about today, and we'll break it down into pieces, but I wanted to talk to you about IQ, EQ, and SQ. So for our people that will be watching, can you break that down into what each of those means individually?
Sure. So this is the equation that I've come up with for pioneering leaders. And what I want to say to anyone who's listening here, that as soon as you start your own business, you're a leader. So whether you're on your own, you're still in a leadership role, you're taking something forward and you're gathering people that align with what you're doing. So let's just get that really clear first, because this is about leadership. I talk about this in leadership. So IQ is your intelligent quotient. So your intelligence and your knowing and your understanding around your own studies, whatever you've accumulated in yourself, your knowledge base. So basically that's your IQ. And I think everyone's pretty much got that squared away. We go into something not without any knowledge. We go into something with some knowledge about it, and then we grow from there. We keep learning, hopefully, and keep growing from there. So EQ, I think, is pretty easy to understand. Everyone will get that. The EQ is emotional quotient. So it's that emotional intelligence. Now that's starting to be spoken about a little bit more in the leadership world. It has been a bit of a tick box kind of thing that they do. But for me, emotional intelligence is absolutely crucial to success. If you don't have that, I come back to that connection to yourself, then your connection to others is not on that real solid integrated self. It's on the repeating patterns, that creative adjustment, that place that we've normalized, that operating pattern that sort of repeats itself but is not really connected to who we are. It's usually from the sufferings that we've had that are not healed or not resolved. So that's the EQ part. And that's going to take a bit, I think, for people to really, really embrace that in the workplace, because it's like, how do I do that? What do those boundaries look like when I'm emotionally intelligent with someone? It's really about, it's really about doing the work yourself first. You can't do the EQ without doing that, in my view, without doing that for yourself. You have to have that within yourself, that deep connection with yourself. And then when you have that, no matter what's going on in your business, in your world, you're not affected so much by that instability that happens external to yourself. And what most of us do is we rely on the external for the internal, what we can give to ourselves internally. So the EQ is something that I think leaders need to really look at in a bit more depth, and understanding about the impact of an emotionally intelligent person, and then creating an emotionally intelligent environment for people.
And I'll share just one of my examples around that. And one is that because of what I experienced in my childhood, I didn't like to hear people yell. Mm-hmm. So raised voices was not something good. And it meant that I should be afraid.
Yeah.
and unsafe. I was felt unsafe. So probably something bad was going to happen. So if you take something like that into the workplace
Yeah.
and people start raising their voice, you can imagine how people who had undergone something like that might respond. I know you do.
Yes.
And um and you don't get good results from that when people disconnect, withdraw from the process just because they heard people raise their voices. So
Exactly.
that emotional intelligence is something that needs to be looked at, because, and one of the reasons why we talk about as an organization honoring the whole person,
Yeah.
the person that shows up to work every day is not just the person that does a really good job at a particular task,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
all of them.
That's right. Exactly right.
And if
And I
you're
think
not
that,
addressing all of them, right,
yeah,
the
and I
whole
think that's where
person,
yeah, our
yeah,
systems fail a little bit there because they don't address that at all, and they're not. It's not so all encompassing. So, yeah, definitely. And that's part of my work in eliminating all unnecessary trauma from the world, and that really is in our systems a lot. I see that a lot, that unnecessary trauma. And what we're talking about here really is trauma. So it's our little 6-year-old or whatever that starts to show up and be in this adult business world. So if we don't take care of these unresolved traumas, then they will show up, and what you'll end up creating, like Peter Levine in his book Waking the Tiger also says, that we tend to reenact what's unresolved. So we draw subconsciously to us the same sort of scenario where you'll get the raised voices and you'll get that feeling because it's not resolved within you. So
right.
and people will notice this. If you take a moment and just recognize, how many times have I dealt with this same thing? I've changed jobs, I've created my own business, but you still keep, doing this same dance with this unresolved issue. And like we were talking a little bit before we started recording about, you can't run far enough away from yourself. And you said something like, what did you
It
say?
was everywhere I go, there I am.
Yeah, love it. It's awesome. I'll probably steal that. It's awesome. But yeah, it's true. Like, we cannot run far enough away from ourselves because we always catch up. So we may as well just stand still. And one of the most difficult things we can do is actually sit and face ourselves. So every client that's ever walked into my clinic, I just honor them and go, wow, you're taking a major step, and really acknowledge that for them, because it is a big step to look at yourself.
I
So
don't know that people always get why is this important to mention? Why is it important to bring up? And one of the things is because you unleash greater potential within the people, not only yourself, but within the potential of people that you hire in your organization have, um, because they're not reacting and responding in in a manner that you don't understand, right?
yeah,
Because you don't know what's going on with them. And
yeah.
so it's more potential that you unleash when people have a greater connection to themselves and they're not facing these traumas that you're talking about.
That's right. And people don't recognize it. I didn't recognize it as traumas, but it's something that I really want to, share with people so that they don't have to stay in this place of restriction. And it's like, if you actually start to understand, it doesn't mean you have to drag up your whole story, but it's like, how is your past in your present? And then when, being a leader, even if you're on your own, you've got clients, you're still or customers, you still have to have this relational experience between them for them to connect with you. Otherwise they won't. So it's like, you have to really just take that time to connect with yourself and really be fully integrated as possible. And we spend a lot of time, on our intellect and making that grow, but we don't spend as much time on our emotional intelligence, or what I'm going to speak about next, which is the systemic intelligence. I think that's pretty much not very well known at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's worthwhile investing in those aspects. And then as you're talking about that whole person, we start to make ourselves more whole.
And I was going to say also too, one of the probably easier ways of recognizing this pattern in others is to look at people who have, I mean, there's lots of examples, but I'll use one: married and divorced, right? You can look at people and you can see that they repeat the same pattern. So they're drawn to the same people. They go through the same scenarios that they went through before. I speak from experience. And so you can recognize a lot of times these things in other people, and it's what you said, that you continue to repeat the past until you resolve it.
Yeah,
And it's the other way that I've heard it is what you resist persists.
absolutely.
So,
It gets much louder, much louder. Yeah,
yes.
yes. Avoid all you like. It doesn't matter. It's not going away. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
And as part of that, as part of taking personal responsibility, right?
yeah.
And
And or not,
owning.
like, people have a choice, they really do. They either feel that, and I think it's about one thing I want to say, it's not because people don't want to do it. Sometimes I think it's around the feeling of not having the support that they need to be able to do whatever they need to do to reconnect to themselves. So
Yeah.
that's an important point too. It's not that people, don't want to often. It's that they don't have the support or the feeling that they can do what they need to do.
Well, and I was going to say, I'm not sure that in transformational coaching that I've done, I could have taken the journey by myself either. For all the want of wanting to improve, to grow, to being curious, I'm not sure that I could have found my way through any and all that I have without guidance and coaching, mentoring, all of those things to be able to go through what I
Yeah,
have been able to. And
I couldn't either. I
yeah,
couldn't either without my own therapist, with our own mentors, because what happens is we lay down a very strong neural pathway with this repeated patterning behavior, and that's our way of being. Even if it's dysfunctional, we're really comfortable in it, and we know how to be in it. Like you were saying before, the married, divorce. It's like you know how to do that really well. What you don't know how to do really well is stay in relationship, kind of thing. So this is just using that example. So the learning is, how do I be in relationship and stay in relationship? So that would be the growth edge for you, yes,
yes,
in that repeating pattern. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I figured it out.
No, no, it's great. But it's like that's the repeating pattern, isn't it? Like to be
Yeah,
able to do that. But we can't, because we've got that neural pathway the way it is, and it's so familiar and well worn, it's like we don't even see that
yeah,
we're operating like that. So it takes something to actually stimulate us to think, I'm done with this. I'm sick of it. And then there's a movement to seek something different for yourself.
yes. Stop to be able to do the self-examination, which is a path I'd recommend taking with someone
Yeah.
who's experienced and understands to help guide you through the proper path.
Yes.
Um, and then I was going to say, so on the other end of EQ, you had another part of the equation.
Yes, so this is SQ, and this is probably less familiar to people if they may never have heard of it before. So this is about systemic intelligence. So when I'm talking about systemic, I'm talking about transgenerationally. So through the generations, what do you carry forward that doesn't actually belong to you? What is showing up in your world that you don't quite understand? It might be that you've got enough money, but you still can't feel happy. So usually those kind of signs are that there's something in the family system that needs addressing. And then apart from that, we have like a collective system that has unresolved trauma, without a doubt, because all we've got to do is look at the societal issues that we have and the way that they're actually increasing. We are talking before about it getting louder. It's
Yeah.
getting louder. At some point, we have to do something different. So for me, COVID's opened up that a lot. So there's a lot of this voices being raised around enough of many of our social issues. But it's just that we don't quite have the understanding, I think, to be able to know what to do next. And this systemic work, it's called family constellation work or systemic constellation work, is a way to have different eyes, different information come to find resolutions to our current issues. So our current issues for ourselves in the micro and current issues for the macro as a collective.
Right.
So did that make sense? Because it's a bit of a new idea. Is that?
Well, I was going to say one of the ways that I would summarize it is that there is trauma in history, and
Yes.
we can even just say history that is passed down through our ancestors that we have no idea what information is actually transmitted through our molecules, right?
That's
Through
right.
through our DNA,
That's right.
and that shows up, and we don't even recognize sometimes what that is unless you have done some in-depth work in not only looking at the history of your family and maybe understanding what some of the things that they did and the hardships that they went through, then you can maybe start to understand, some of what that is residual echoes,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it our connection, right? Our connection to everything, past, present, and future, is
That's right.
basically what it is.
Yes, and understanding that, we're the result of thousands who have gone before us. So I know in Australia here, we don't have a very strong culture. I'm talking about white people here. We don't have a very strong culture and connectedness to our ancestry, because the collective unresolved trauma that's in the ancestry hasn't been addressed or really looked at by the white people. And I think that there's this opening up, as I was speaking about before, is really giving this a place in looking for a solution. And I love Albert Einstein's quote, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that we created it with. And that's what,
Right.
even though people have really good intentions and they're trying really hard to solve the problem, it's like we're repeating, but dressing it up a little bit differently. We're not actually resolving, because domestic family violence is rising and the intensity of the violence is rising. The gap between white and Indigenous or people of color, it's not getting any smaller. So if we were doing the right thing and we were on the right track, we would be seeing different results than what we're seeing. So we need to stop and say, what are we doing? What do we actually need, rather than coming up with what we think is the new solution, but it's just dressed up in a different frock.
Yes. Yes. And so I'm trying to remember the quote that I saw on your website from John F. Kennedy. It's not one of his that's used very often. And I was appreciating that. I'm like, oh, that is a great quote. So that's appropriate. If you have it on top of mind, I would love for you to share that.
I can't remember that one off the top of my head.
It's something like a few people in the world doing good makes a difference, and and what if more of us, or we should all try to do that. It's certainly not perfect the way I've said it, but I just looked at that and I'm like, and that's for those people who think that this is, I don't know, too big, too overwhelming, too much to take on. I would challenge that it's one person at a time, right?
Yes.
It starts with your own personal intent in the
Yes.
world, how you are being with other people.
Yes. Yes. And if you bring that systemic stuff back into like a smaller context in business, it's like, it may be that people come from families who have successful businesses. And it might be that even though the business is successful, there's not that filled up heart enjoyment in being in the business. But out of loyalty to the family, I continue in the business. So it's not what your soul really wants, it's what you're doing out of loyalty to your generations gone backwards. Right. So that's just a very simplistic idea of what can show up and how it can show up. But we don't really look past ourselves to see what's happening. We own that ourselves, rather than thinking that, oh, maybe there's something that's come through the lineage that I actually don't have to align with, or I can connect in a different way, not the way that I am.
Right. Yes. So again, more on inner reflection too.
Yeah.
Right.
Always,
and that being okay, and not just looking at what we think societal norms are.
Yes.
But yes, looking within and utilizing some of the wisdom that comes from there.
And it can be really tricky, because we're so conformed into this way of not challenging from such an early age. I can remember when I had my first daughter, and my natural instinct was just to feed her when I felt. But in the hospital, I had like these 4 hourly or however, whatever it was. Yes. I just wrote, yep, done, yep, done, yep, done. I'm a bit of a rebel, but just the conformity that we're just so conditioned into this from such a very young age. You feed your child every 4 hours.
This is the way you must do it, and this is the way it always must be done.
Yeah, so it's not so easy to sort of even recognize that I can actually question, I can challenge. So even if people do it in their mind, and just start to go, well, is that really true? Is that true for me? Do I actually agree with that? They don't have to speak it out always, but just starting that process of questioning and challenging and feeling what's true for them.
Yeah. So what can companies do to embody IQ, EQ, and SQ?
Well, I have a program called Compassionate Empowered Workplaces, and it's people have enough intelligence, so I don't go to the intelligence and the strategy. I don't do that part. What I work with majorly is that EQ and the SQ, seeing how that SQ actually is in impacting the business and the business owner, or the organization. And usually it's because people have issues in the organization with, their environment. Could be a toxic work environment, could be that there's bullying happening. It's just showing up in ways where people don't know, leaders don't know what to do next. They don't know that they haven't got that skill set usually. So it's that kind of support that offers, or that I offer for that. And there's many other people who do this work as well, but this is my offering into the world. Like I was saying before, like what's in your part? What can you bring to the world? And there'll be people that connect with me, and there'll be people that go, oh, I don't think what she's saying is really clever, and that's okay. It's totally fine. But it's like the people that connect to the people that, I want to talk to, because that's where we can actually do some really good work. If there's a feeling that, oh, I don't really resonate, then that's also okay. There'll be someone in the space for this person that doesn't resonate with me. So it's about really getting that, building out that wholeness you spoke about earlier for the business owner or the CEO or whoever it is that's in this business world, to start to have these other intelligences included in their little toolbox that they have. And it's amazing, like the empowerment that comes from actually having some knowledge around this. And I also don't leave them at the end. You know how you've done courses before and it's been great, and then you go back and you just hop back into your old routine, you don't implement it.
Yes.
I really want this to be implemented. If someone wants to take this on and goes through my training, then I'm going to be there to support them. And this recalibration hub is part of that support process. So if they come up against something, it's usually in that moment where you can't sort of think, you've got your old habitual ways of doing things, where they can just jump on, email me, go, I need a hand with blah, and then they can get support. And then there'll be a group as well of people who can also learn from the experience if they wanted to do it publicly. If not, then I would use the theme or the kind of issue and use that as a training for everybody in the group. So everybody benefits from the learning.
Make it more general.
Yes.
Well, great. I appreciate your background and information on that. And as we're getting close to wrap up, I wanted to ask you, so what's next for you?
Well, I think this work between white Australians and Indigenous here in this country is really, I'm so passionate about that. But what my focus is on the white people, it's not on the Indigenous people. It's the white people and what our work is, because I think this part hasn't necessarily been explored excessively. So I think this is where we're stuck in being able to close the gap between both of us and all of us to sit at the table on an equal pegging, not where the white race has a higher standing.
Right. Yes. Where we're dictating, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And this is this generational thing where it comes through, even just being born white, I have inner racism and biases because of this lineage that I come from. So it's bringing it into my awareness, not making it wrong, but going, it helps with understanding. Yeah.
Right. So, Linda, I really want to thank you so much. This has been a really informative and interesting talk today. And on behalf of all of our attendees and Scale Up Biz, we really appreciate your candor and your helpful insight and tips. So stay tuned for the next Scale Up Biz Summit.